You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Welcome into the basement. My name is Chris. Ed has this episode off. He'll be back on the next one. It's also going to be audio only for you YouTube followers. That's because our guest is audio only. So you'll be looking at a blank screen or just my face while he was answering questions. But it's a good guest. Elijah Evans is going to spend some time with us. He's one of my favorite prospect guys. We're going to talk about the results of the draft, who we should be watching, what's going on in the minor leagues, what's going on with some of the guys up here in the majors, who's actually going to be part of this team long term, what can the White Sox get in some of these possible trades before the deadline. There is a ton to cover. It's all brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park, corner of 33rd and Princeton in the shadow of the ballpark. The ballpark favorites, the award-winning menu of burgers, extensive bar, rotation of craft beers, familiar favorites, spirits and wines. Really the best place to hang out pregame, postgame, in-game, the indoor-outdoor seating. Such a great location. Stop in and see them. The home of Sox in the Basement, Cork and Carry at the Park. See more at corkandcarry.com. This past weekend, the Cubs series was fun to watch. That Friday night game, I liked messing with my Cub fan friends because they were really intense, and I was just laughing like, hey, this is a pretty good game. You guys watching it? And then, of course, the Sox lost the next two and seemingly have forgotten how to play baseball. But that's going to happen. It's going to be up and down. I liked watching the young guys play. There was a lot of good in that series, even though they lost the series 2 out of 3. That said, listening to the TV broadcast is excruciating still, and it was worse during that series. Every base hit, you would have thought it was the World Series. Calm down, Schriffen. Steve Stone's eyes must roll back into his head so much he's seen his own brain multiple times. I heard Miguel Vargas declared a superstar, not a star, not a good player, a superstar at one point. Everybody on this team is going to be absolutely incredible and have Hall of Fame careers. I believe he gets paid by the platitude, whether it be talking about the organization or a player on the team, or my favorite thing, the real fans. I heard that one. I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday. The real fans who have stuck with this team, and the real fans who come out to the ballpark, and the real fans who don't question all the mistakes that were made, not only by the front offices of the past, but ownership that still exists and has existed in that building for 40 years. But he doesn't know that because he hasn't watched a lot of baseball in the last 40 years. He's still learning the rules. John Rooney filled in on the radio recently. Contrast that to the guy that's doing play-by-play on TV. It'll make your head hurt. We have a message that came in at Sox in the Basement. You can leave a message. You can leave voicemails. I try to get to some of them. I cannot get to all of them. But here's one from Sean Dickens, who writes, "Good morning. Love the show. To expand on the Sox-Cubs rivalry conversation, I'd like to say I hate the Twins, Royals, Cleveland, and Tigers as well. That being said, it just feels different with the Cubs and in general. I definitely think interleague play has ruined the rivalry for Sox-Cubs, but the Bud Selig move of his Brewers to the National League also took our rivalry with the Brewers away." He goes on to talk about how the Cubs now have the Cardinals and the Brewers, and we lost a couple of rivals because Bud Selig sucks. I'm with you. Bud Selig was terrible. By the way, he's the guy that got Jerry Reinsdorf to take over the White Sox. Kind of handpicked him. Hey, the cool thing, though, is when Schriffen was talking about Dick Allen over the weekend, at least Steve Stone, who played with him, was able to actually add something to the conversation. And this time, he got Bill Veck's name right. Good job. As our guest jumps on the line, a reminder for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors. Look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales, not in your kitchen. You're in their showroom instead, getting to see everything in full display and asking an owner who will be in showroom any question you want. There's also an owner on site during all installs and all of their own employees. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for 40 years. In Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands, custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is located a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. I trusted them to put in windows in my place. I say you can do it too. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. On the phone line with me right now from Just Baseball, Future Sox. He's got a podcast called, I believe, the Call Up Pod. Elijah Evans is on the line. Welcome back, Elijah. How are you?
Good. How are you? It's good to be back and good to be in deadline week right now.
Do you care about the Cubs-Sox rivalry? The rivalry's been dead, at least the way it used to be. It's been dead for me for a while. What do you think of that rivalry?
Yeah, it's been a bit dead. I would agree there. I don't think it's quite what it maybe used to be. I think it's going to be a little bit. I mean, when these teams are both good, I think those series always get intense. We just haven't had that, unfortunately, in recent years. You know, the White Sox a couple years of being good. The Cubs were on a bit of a downswing, and then now the Cubs are in this competitive window, and the White Sox are obviously rebuilding. So I think it's I always want to, I'm always rooting for the White Sox to beat up on the Cubs for sure. But I do think that it loses a little bit of that excitement when one team is much worse than the other.
What do you anticipate the White Sox doing as this deadline approaches? Because there's a lot of guys they could trade, but I got a scary feeling here they're not going to get much done. Like, do they move Luis Robert Jr., and how many other pieces do you think that Chris Getz can move? Unless he does something stupid and gives them away for nothing. Like, what can he realistically move? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're moving the rentals, of course. I think that, the most obvious trade chips are Mike Tauchman and Adrian Hauser, and then probably a couple of the relief guys. I mean, Luis Robert is at this point, I have no idea, man. I have been kind of on the wagon of just you get what you get for him, you move on, you call it a day, just because the organization, I think, needs to be in that next kind of phase. But at the same time, what are you getting for him? So it's just it's such a frustrating situation, honestly, because I think that the optimal scenario is you trade Luis Robert, you get a solid piece or two from him, and you just move on and move into this next generation. But I just don't know what you're going to get from him at this point, which could lead to, if he doesn't get traded, no matter what the deadline is going to feel a little bit disappointing, because you're moving in Adrian Hauser, who you're going to get something pretty solid for Adrian Hauser, which is kind of exciting considering it's a guy, they picked up for nothing, in the middle of the season. So that one is fun for sure. But then beyond that, you get something for Mike Tauchman. Maybe he's had a good season, but he's a 35-year-old outfielder who doesn't move very well at this point, right? And then some bullpen arms, you got a couple guys who can get you a flyer, but there's nobody in that bullpen who's getting you anything substantive, right? So it really comes down to do they cash in on Luis Robert? And if they do, do they get anything that's actually exciting? And then, how much can you push the market for a Hauser?
James Fox, who's also over at Future Sox, was on this show about a week or so ago, and we were talking about the gap in prospects. Essentially, you have all of your higher-end guys who are ready for the majors up here already, at least for the most part.
Right.
And then you have the next group that really could make a difference is way down there. And so there's a gap. And so his hope was maybe you can find something to fill the gap here at the trade deadline, moving some of these pieces. Do they have the pieces to be able to do that? Do you think Chris Getz will target guys at the AA, close to AAA, or even in AAA level? He always says he's not trying to do that, but it felt like he was moving in that direction with a lot of his moves last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can try to kind of close that gap and find those pieces, right? But at the same time, you may get more value ultimately. And I know that it's more of a project. It's probably frustrating for some fans, but I do think there's probably more value to be found in some 18, 19-year-old kind of more project pieces, right? So what is that kind of balance between trying to maximize your value with maybe younger upside pieces compared to those more advanced prospects who also just might have a much lower ceiling? I think the whole ceiling versus floor thing is going to be fascinating to see kind of what that looks like. I don't know, man. I think that you're going to try to just squeeze every bit of value you can out of the handful of trade chips they have. And for me, if that comes in the form of, it being some lower age, kind of low level project pieces, if that provides more value than some of those near big league ready guys, I'm okay with that direction, even though it is, a little bit more of a risky long game option there.
The draft has happened since the last time I talked to a prospect head, so I've got to ask you, what do you think about what the White Sox went out and did? Are there names that I should be paying attention to that you notice in that draft? Doesn't need to be somebody at the top, but I mean, who excited you the most out of their draft class?
Yeah, I wish I could say it wasn't the top because it's always fun to look at sleepers, but it was. I mean, I think this draft is really gonna lean pretty heavily on the three prep guys taken in the first, second, and fourth round. They spent a lot of money and a lot of a substantive portion of the pool on bringing in Billy Carlson, Jaden Fauske, and then Landon Hodge as the three high school high upside guys. Those are the three guys they paid up for. Obviously Fauske being a guy that they paid, 800,000 over the slot value for in the second round. I did an interview with him a couple weeks ago and got to just kind of hear his process and everything once he got drafted by the team. So, I think that it really comes down to those three prep guys and they are those projects, right? Like they're not going to be guys who are in Chicago anytime soon. But I do think that kind of leaning into this current status of the organization and being able to be pretty honest and say, hey, like, this is not a team that's ready to compete in the next year or two. So we're going to take some younger guys we really do think we can develop and turn into really solid ball players as they kind of grow here. Is the right route. And I think that it was pretty clear going into the draft that the White Sox were going to go with two big high-end prep guys early, and they went through with that. And I think that it was the right decision just to lean into that future with some of those younger prep guys. So, yeah, I mean, I'm circling Carlson and Fauske, particularly the first two picks, as two guys who have a ton of upside. And it's going to take some time, and it's not going to be anytime soon when they're making an impact for the White Sox. But I think that those prep guys are really going to be what kind of makes or breaks this draft.
Before I get to a kind of a follow-up about the guy that they drafted third from Georgia Tech, who was the only guy who wasn't a prep in the first four picks, because I do want to ask you about him, Billy Carlson. When they select him, it was funny. First of all, your counterpart over on Future Sox, James Fox, that was the first name he said when he was trying to guess, on our show at least, who he thought they were going to take. So that was he gets kudos for that. Secondly, immediately what I'm reading about him after the White Sox draft him is best defensive player in the entire class. So does he have the bat to go along with it? Like, I love the defense. He's 18 years old. What's you've seen prospects before. You study them all the time basically it seems to be all you do. So when you look at a Billy Carlson and he's got the glove and he can play the position and he should be able to stick at shortstop if he's the best defensive player in the class. So now, how do you figure out when he becomes a hitter? Is that something where he's got to grow into his body? Is he one of those guys who are waiting for him to get more power? Is he one of those guys that already has a bat? Like, what are we looking for the next couple of years to see if he's actually developing?
Yeah, definitely. You kind of hit it a lot there. I mean, I think that the glove is plus, right? I mean, he was touted as the clear top defensive shortstop in the class. So, you're banking on a guy that's going to stick at shortstop. Offensively, he really started to show a lot in the summer circuit this past year, and I think he really took many steps forward with the bat. I do think there's some swing changes in the work there. I think the one thing I'm going to be keyed in on with him in the next year or two is kind of how that swing adjusts with time. Right now, it can get a little long at times. He kind of has some motions in his body that I think are not necessarily the most efficient. So with him, I think it really, I'm kind of looking at what changes are made when he gets to the organization and how they kind of adjust his swing to just maximize his physicality, because he's a really strong kid and a lot of, really physical good attributes there to work off of. But I do think that there will be some adjustments to the swing. So I am really going to be curious to see what the swing looks like as he gets older. It's definitely power projection. It seems like he's the type of guy who could kind of grow into a lot of power. Hasn't necessarily shown a ton of power to this point, but again, high school guy, 18 years old, going to be 19 soon here. So definitely plenty of time with Carlson. But I do think that it's going to be cool to see what the White Sox decide to do with his swing as they kind of get him into their organization and get him situated here.
All right, tell me if I say this guy's name wrong. Kyle Lodis. He's the third round pick from Georgia Tech. Do they take the college kid who also plays shortstop because he's going to slot a little bit ahead of Carlson in terms of development because he's got a few more years on him, and maybe he is ahead of him. Maybe he's at Double-A while Carlson's at Single-A as they're going along. Is that what the reasoning is there, that they're like, we need another middle infielder, but we want one that we don't have to wait 4 or 5 years for?
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. I think with Lodis, so I interviewed him yesterday. I just got to talk to him and kind of hear a little bit more from him and just about who he is. He's a super interesting player because it is that kind of more higher floor, safer profile infielder. But at the same time, he was a D2 guy for 2 years and then transferred to the ACC to Georgia Tech. So this is not a guy who was highly touted out of high school at all. He wasn't a high-end recruit by any means. And now you look at what he's doing right now, and he's really, really taken a step forward this past year. His first year of D1 ball, he showed a lot of makings. And I think that's why the White Sox keyed in on him as a guy who has a higher floor because he's a solid shortstop. He's played, a year of high-end college ball, but there's still a lot more to tap into there. And I think that's what I've heard from a couple scouts within the organization. Is just that he is someone who, has this kind of stable floor, but also has more to grow into. The power's still kind of coming. He talked to me in this interview yesterday about how he's kind of just figured out how to really pull the ball in the air. And that's one thing for some of those kind of good contact bat to ball hitters, which is kind of who he's been. Once you start to find some of that air pull to your pull side and really start to be able to launch a little bit more and create a little bit more angle on his swing, that's when you kind of start to grow into that power and see who you can become as a hitter. And I think he's kind of just still knocking on that door. So with Lodis, it's a really well-rounded profile. He's probably an average shortstop defensively, pretty good, above average hit tool, a little bit below average power at the current time. But with him, if he can kind of grow into a little bit more of that power and still kind of tick up with that and grow into his body a little bit more, I do think that he has a little bit more upside than I may have thought at the time of, when you look at the profile at the first glance. I think there's a little bit more juice in there as he kind of develops here.
So let's turn back to what we already had in our system before this draft occurred. You guys just put out a list, if I'm not mistaken, at Just Baseball. I think it was your new top 100 prospect list. There's 5 White Sox players on that list. I know about 4 of them. I know Kyle Teal. He's already here. I know who Noah Schultz is. I'm waiting anxiously. I got Brady Montgomery on that list. He's sitting at 77. Hagen Smith, another one of those pitchers, could end up being a top of the rotation guy. The guy that you have at 98, I just can't keep track of all these guys. Tell me about Caleb Bonnemer.
Yeah, so Bonnemer was the second rounder last year, and he was a guy who they spent pretty big on. That was a similar situation to Fauci this year, where the White Sox have had this kind of tendency lately to really spend big on their second pick and chase after a prep guy that they think is even better than that draft spot. And Bonnemer got, borderline first round money last year at the 40-something overall pick by the White Sox. And he's been a really impressive first pro season from him. He has done more this season than I expected him to do, just given the fact that, it's a big transition from high school, man. And that's one thing I try to reiterate to anybody I'm talking to about prospects, and just how much of a change it is for these high school guys when they get into pro ball, and the difference between playing, a 40-game high school season and a 110-game minor league season. It's a huge jump. And Bonnemer has taken it with stride this season. He has started the year in Kannapolis. He's going to spend probably the whole season in single A just because he's only 19 years old. But, it's really well-rounded toolkit. He's showing the ability to play both shortstop and third base pretty well. He's kind of mixed between the two positions. It's power, but he still hasn't quite grown into his power. He's had 8 homers this year, but it's kind of shown the really strong exit velos and the ability to get into the ball. I just think he's still kind of growing into himself as a hitter. And what's impressive for Bonnemer is it's a really good approach. He takes his walks, he takes his pitches. His contact rates are very high for a player of his age, just at his point in development. Some sneaky speed, 23 stolen bases on the year. And it really just has been a very impressive first season for Bonnemer. There's a long way to go for this guy. Like I said, he's in single A, and I think he's going to finish the entire year in single A. But, with a guy like him, I think there's a very real world where Caleb Bonnemer is, one of soon enough is the best, if not one of the top 2 or 3 prospects in the system.
All right. Well, I got to ask you about 2 of the names on the list, because I ask everybody about them, because the answers vary all the time. So there's no way you're going to sound like anybody else that's been on this show. Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith. What are these guys doing? When am I expecting them here? And when am I expecting them here as effective high-end pitchers? Because that's the promise, but it feels like it's not moving in the time frame that I thought it was going to move in. Can you break those 2 guys down for me?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year for these guys, and I think that's what some people are frustrated with, but I think it's less about being frustrated, more just about kind of figuring out what it's going to look like from them. I think that, it's been a learning process this season. It hasn't been as exciting or as good as we maybe were hoping it was going to be, but that doesn't mean it's been a bad thing. I think the biggest thing, starting with Schultz, right, is just building up those innings, continuing to get his innings under his belt, make sure that he's healthy. And it's been a lot of tweaking for him. They've really been kind of teetering with his arsenal a lot this season and trying to figure out kind of who he can be as a pitcher at the next level. I honestly do think that the White Sox, whether they would say this or not, maybe have kind of admitted to a degree that they're okay with him taking a half step back in terms of his results for the sake of just kind of figuring out who he can be in the future. So this season has been a lot of experimenting with him in terms of what he's throwing. I know he's been a little banged up, this injury he's dealing with right now. So, and also just being in Charlotte too, it's a whole nother, a different baseball, or there's a different feel to it. Obviously Charlotte's a very hitter friendly place. So I think with Schultz, it's been a little bit of a frustrating season, but I still really believe in the upside there. And I think that it's still, a lot to dream on. And this year, more than anything, just getting those innings is the biggest thing. And even if the results have taken a step back, I still think there is plenty of excitement going forward with him. Hagen Smith's been a little weird. I honestly expected him to kind of breeze through the minors this year, coming out of college last year, being, one of the best college pitchers we've seen in the past handful of years. And it really hasn't been that, unfortunately. I just don't know if Hagen Smith has been fully healthy this season. I think that's one thing that with him, it's like his velo's down 3-4 miles an hour from where it was last year, even in college, right? That just to me screams that there's something going on there in terms of just who he is and kind of his body and where that's at. So I don't know with Hagen. I think that the plan is still for these guys to be, big league pitchers for the White Sox next year. Like that is the plan. The White Sox haven't really been, they haven't been hiding the fact that they want these guys to be in the bigs next season. But how you get there, given that it's been kind of a tougher year in different ways for both of them, is going to be interesting to see, because I think that, you want these guys to be starters. Like the goal is for these guys to be in your rotation as soon as next season and for many years to come. With that comes, a level of durability needed that we haven't really seen from them to this point. And especially with Hagen, like the stuff is just backed up this season in terms of the overall, velocity, how much everything's moving. And it hasn't been quite as good as we were hoping and expecting it to be. So I'm curious to see what the plan is moving forward. But I do think just them finishing out the year healthy, making sure they get these innings under their belt is the first and foremost priority.
Do you think Braden Montgomery going up to Double-A already was shocking? It feels like they have no outfielders in the hopper, so like they're moving really quick. Was it a good move to move him up to the next level?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit aggressive. I was definitely a little surprised. I did expect him to finish the year in Birmingham. I just thought it would probably be more late in the season, like the last week or two of the season in September, maybe. I didn't expect it to be quite this soon, but honestly, he has had some ups and downs in high A, but has been really good over the past couple of weeks. So I think I'm curious to see how it plays out for him in Birmingham, because, after a bit of a, up and down a little bit, he had a really cold streak in Winston in about June. And then, the past couple of weeks, he's looked a lot better. So I think the White Sox this year have shown that they're not afraid to just grab the hot hand and just roll with it. And with a lot of prospects this season, it's been like, oh, this guy's having a really great month. Let's just keep him moving. And that's the decision with Montgomery. Ultimately, with him being an SEC guy, having a lot of high-end experience, first-round pick out of college, right? Like Double-A is where you kind of see that make or break for these guys. It's not that he did have some ups and downs in high A, but I think Double-A, it will be where he finishes this year and probably where he starts next year. And that'll be the level where you really see kind of what he can be going forward, I think.
All right, let's real quick then, before I let you go, take a look at the guys that are currently on the roster, because you follow these guys as prospects, and I'm curious what you think about the results so far. I'll start off first with a guy who's an outfielder who was not an outfielder when this season started, at least in my mind. Is Brooks Baldwin really a center fielder, and what do you think about this experiment?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can try it out. I don't think it's a bad thing to try, just given the fact that you're, potentially not going to have Luis Robert in a couple of days from now, right? So I think that if Brooks is playing center field the rest of this season, or, even if you end up DHing Robert, like that's fine with me. Really what Brooks Baldwin in long-term is a super utility. I think that for him, the value of having him on the roster in the long-term future is going to be his ability to play all over. If it's center field, great. And then if you can have him as a depth guy at second or at shortstop, right? Like there's just a lot of infielders in the roster right now and in the system in general. So I think with him, it's more of just like, oh, he has played some outfield and he can play outfield because there's a lot of guys that can play infield for the team. So it's a weird situation. I don't think he's a natural outfielder. He isn't a natural outfielder, but I do think he holds his own, and I think he can at least be kind of a depth outfield type option for the team.
All right, Colson Montgomery. I mean, I got to tell you, honestly, Elijah, if you take a look at his baseball card the last couple of years, every time he goes up a level, he gets worse at the plate. Then he has a terrible run. They even have to send him to the Arizona Fall League. They work with him. He kind of gets some results, starts to slip off a little bit. They get like a good week or so, they bring him up. I mean, I want to be excited about what I'm seeing so far. I really, really do. Can I be excited about Colson Montgomery? Am I allowed to be? Or should I be nervous that until I get a bigger sample size?
I think somewhere in between, I would say.
That doesn't give me any confidence, Elijah. Not at all.
No. I think it is somewhere in between. I think it's okay to be excited. He's doing some really good things right now. You're seeing the version of Colson Montgomery the past week or two that is kind of the best version of himself, and a version that I think is going to be able to succeed at the big league level. The power is real. I mean, he has increased his bat speed and just his ability to launch the ball. And, the White Sox have worked with him very directly on his swing and what that can be going forward. So I think that it's totally reasonable to be excited about him and be looking forward to this, because this is still the guy that was the top prospect in the system for 2 years in a row and has a ton of talent and upside at the plate. I do think you're still going to get a lot of swing and miss with him. I think that right now he's almost leaning into that kind of, power type of hitter at this point, which is not a bad thing, because I think that could serve him best in terms of where he's going from now on. But I'm curious to see how it continues to play out for him. I think there's some areas of his game that he will still need to work on as he develops. But I'm very much, I've been saying all season, even with the really rough results in Charlotte, I still believe he's a big league player, and I still believe he can be a very solid big league player.
All right, I'm going to give you 4 guys, then I'm going to let you out of here. But 4 guys that are rookies or close enough to being a rookie that at least some people believe they could develop into something else. I'm going to tell you if I believe in them. And I'm just wondering if you believe in these guys too. I believe in Edgar Caro. I believe in Kyle Teal. I believe in Chase Meidroth, even though he's struggling a little bit at the plate, but he still tries to get on base, and he seems like a ball player to me. I don't believe in Miguel Vargas because it was just 1 month that he was good. Am I right or wrong about any of these 4 guys?
I think, I feel very good about both the catchers. I've been pretty high on both of them for a while. I think Caro and Teal are both going to be big league players. I just saw online that, today they're both playing in the same lineup, which about time. Every time I'm on any show, I'm harping the fact that like these two should be playing every day. And Teal and Caro, like, I think the whole like, oh, we can't have 2 catchers playing the same day is ridiculous. Like, given this roster and this lineup, there is no reason those guys should not be in the same lineup every day, even with that kind of being, having to play one of them at DH. Like, whatever, who cares? Get them in the lineup and get them at bats, because I do really believe in both those guys. I think they're both going to be very solid big league players, and we've already seen some positive signs, obviously some ups and downs for those guys. But yeah, remember, these are 22 and 23-year-old guys who are playing the hardest position in baseball at this level as rookies right now. So I'm very confident in those two. I think that it's going to become a very, very solid catching duo in Chicago. I truly believe that. And then beyond that, Chase Meidroth, I'm a little more in between on. I think I'm a little bit lukewarm on him compared to some other people. I do think that it's a very impressive hit tool. He's not a guy who's going to strike out a lot, and he does make very consistent contact. I don't know if I ever see him being more than an average player in the big leagues, or even a tick below average maybe, just because there's kind of a limitation on what he can do in terms of his overall impact. But I think he can at least be a solid piece for this team, even if he's not necessarily a key piece, right? He can be a solid contributor across the board. I'm not out on Vargas yet. I do think that there's a lot to like there with Miguel Vargas. I don't know if I'm like penciling him in as a cornerstone piece by any means.
I mean, listen, Elijah, over the weekend, John Schriffen called him a superstar.
Yeah, let's not do that. Well, that's John Schriffen. But besides the point, I don't think he's a superstar. But I do think Miguel Vargas could be a piece of this team still. I really do. I still think people kind of have lost track of just how young he is and just how much, there has been kind of a weird development track for him with the Dodgers, where he really didn't get a lot of innings, and he kind of had this up and down from the bigs to the minors and such. And he is 25 years old, right? Like, this is not a guy who's he still is a pretty early in his career player. And I think that there's been some positive signs and growth from him this year. Again, like, I don't see him as a star, but I do think Miguel Vargas can still be a solid big league piece for the White Sox. And at least right now, given the status of the roster, like, he deserves to get at bats consistently, and I think he will. And I think he'll have some moments where he shows some very positive signs.
Elijah Evans is with Just Baseball. He's also got the Call-Up Pod. He's with Future Sox, and he's nice enough to come on Sox in the Basement. Thanks so much, my friend.
Yeah, always a pleasure to join you and talk some White Sox. And I'm excited to see where the next few months brings the White Sox. And I do think 2026 is going to be pretty fun for us.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found. And always on soxinthebasement.com.